On May 2nd, get ready to escape. ISIS escaped from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Escape from Transylvania in paperback and e-reader May 2nd. Yesterday, comedian Bill Cosby was convicted on 3 counts of sexual assault against Andrea Constand in a 15-year-old sexual assault case. And while many feminists, social justice warriors, liberals, and white supremacists celebrated this conviction as a victory, many of us in the MGTOW community and the manosphere lament this decision. Because with this conviction of Bill Cosby, the nail has been put in the coffin as related to men's rights here in America. Now, when it comes down to many of these people in these groups like feminists, social justice warriors, liberals, and white supremacists, they are feeling emotional satisfaction about putting a black man in prison. However, most of us in the manosphere, we see the big picture as related to men's rights here in America. And that picture has just become incredibly bleak because with Bill Cosby's conviction on sexual assault in this incredibly weak case, what has happened is a legal precedent has been set for men's rights here in the 21st century. Now, what many of these feminists and these white supremacists, these racists and SJWs just don't understand is that when you have a court case and you have a conviction, it sets a legal precedent for how the law will be interpreted from that point on in. And this was established with the case of Dred Scott back in the 1800s and Plessy versus Ferguson. And with the Dred Scott case, Dred Scott was fighting for the equal right to sit on a train with white people in a white car, and Plessy versus Ferguson was also fighting for equal rights for black people. However, because the law was interpreted subjectively based on the emotions of racists, what happened was the law was interpreted to create the precedent of separate but equal. And with the precedent of separate but equal, that laid the foundation for Jim Crow in the South and the oppressive laws of Jim Crow and the oppressive unwritten social rules of Jim Crow and the discriminatory and racist practices implemented in the North as related to unwritten social rules for how black people got jobs and how black people were allowed to even live in certain parts of the country. And how does this relate to Bill Cosby's conviction? Because what that judge and what that jury did was they set a legal precedent to take away the rights of men here in America, regardless of their race, whether they be black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or Arab, because with this conviction, the rights of men have been restricted and limited due to this subjective interpretation of the law and this subjective prosecution of Bill Cosby on these old charges, which many prosecutors said had no credibility due to the victim. However, because these racists and these feminists wanted to destroy the reputation of a black man, they have now destroyed men's rights here in America. And how have they destroyed men's rights here in America? Because with this legal precedent, what is established now is that women have destroyed the whole concept of due process under the law. Because under the Sixth Amendment, before this case, men had due process under the law. And with the objective interpretation of the law, what they could get was their case heard in a court of law based on facts. And with this conviction, what we have had happen is that instead of us getting an interpretation of the law based on facts, we are now getting a subjective interpretation of due process based on women's feelings and public opinion. Because the whole Bill Cosby sexual assault trial, these charges were brought up not based on facts under the law. No, they were brought up under objective emotional feelings regarding Bill Cosby's success as a black man who had over $400 million. And they were brought up because many of the victims in the Bill Cosby case, they wanted to get a payday at Bill Cosby's expense, because when it came down to many of these women who were making these allegations against Bill Cosby, many of these women, they were old, faded former starlets, old casting couch women, and old side pieces who's traded on their looks. And now that they were in their older age and could no longer trade on their looks, they were looking to get access to resources. And they wanted to use the victim card as the way to get access to Bill Cosby's resources. And they came up with this whole idea of making it like Bill Cosby was a black brute and he was some sort of sexual deviant. And they made these allegations in public opinion because before this case, many of their cases were being thrown out because they were being judged under the objective law based on interpretation of facts. However, thanks to these manginas in this Philadelphia courtroom, because the prosecutor is a male feminist and the judge is a male feminist, what has happened is instead of the interpretation of the law being objective, it is now a precedent that the law is now subjective. And because it's subjective based on women's feelings, what is going to happen now in the courts after this Bill Cosby conviction is that women now have the legal precedent set for them that they can now bring charges against any man in a court based on their feelings and based on public opinion. Because what one of the tenets of the whole Me Too and Time's Up movement is that it's not about sexual harassment and sexual assault. It is about laying a legal platform for females to lay a platform to be able to make allegations against any man without having to bring the evidence in to substantiate their claims. And what that does is it obliterates the Sixth Amendment here in the United States regarding due process under the law. So instead of us having objective due process where people bring in facts and evidence to reinforce their arguments and reinforce their allegations, all we have now, thanks to this precedent, is that any female can go into any court based on her feelings, making allegations about an event without having any sort of evidence to reinforce their argument or reinforce their allegations. And they can now go into any courtroom now and get charges brought up on any man. And this is what the racists and white supremacists don't understand about this case. They're so caught up in their feelings about Bill Cosby that they don't even know that they have dug their own grave as related to the laws of this land and the courts of this land. Because with that mangina and judge and that prosecutor, these traitors to men, they have dealt the death blow to men's rights here in America. Because what the Me Too and the Time's Up movement were trying to do with this Bill Cosby sexual assault case was two things. One, they were trying to get access to Bill Cosby's resources. Two, they were trying to establish a legal precedent so they could lay the foundation for destroying due process under the law. Because if they can destroy due process under the law, they not only are going to destroy Bill Cosby, they are also going to start going after other men. And that's what the whole case was for many of these feminists in the long term. It was all about being able to lay the foundation to destroy due process under the law, lay the foundation for their platform to not to go after other men in society and have the legal precedent to argue these cases so they would get legal judgments against those men in civil court and the corporations they worked for. Because with this whole case of Bill Cosby, it was not about sexual harassment and sexual assault, and it wasn't about Bill Cosby. It was about older women getting access to the resources of richer men like Roger Ailes, like Bill O'Reilly, like Harvey Weinstein, and the corporations they work for, like the Big Six media. Because with most of these older women, they were making these allegations because their careers had stalled, they traded on their looks, and they could not go any further because they had hit what many men call the wall. And because they had hit the wall, they could no longer trade on their looks, they had no actual skills or abilities, and they were looking for a way to get access to resources to take care of themselves in their older age. And with the Bill Cosby conviction, it has paved the way for them to be able to start filing lawsuits against the richer men, these rich white men who they really wanted to go after. What they wanted to do was they wanted to play on the emotions of these racists and these white supremacists, and they used these white racist emotions to manipulate them into getting the conviction that they wanted in this case. And now they're going to use that again as the foundation to start filing these civil lawsuits against not only Bill Cosby, but again, these white men and the corporations they work for. And this is the big mistake that many of these racists made as related to Bill Cosby. They thought they were going to destroy this black man and his legacy, but what they actually did was they laid the foundation to destroy men's rights here in America. Because again, the Me Too and the Time's Up movement, they are about taking away men's rights. They are about restricting men's rights. And what they ultimately, what these feminists want to do is they want to implement a platform of gynocentric Jim Crow on men. And that's what this whole foundation of this case was all about. It was about laying the foundation for gynocentric Jim Crow. And under the gynocentric Jim Crow system that many of these feminists have envisioned in their minds, they want to put men of all races in a second-class position while they live off resources at their expense, because that's what all of this is all about. Because many of these older women know that they no longer can trade on their looks, they can no longer be on the casting couch, they can no longer be able to go out here and use men to be side pieces. They no longer can get resources from men, and they want to implement a legal system that ensures that they can continue to get access to resources in their older age. Because when it comes down to most women, they get their resources from men primarily. And the reason why they want to continue getting resources from men is because they can't get resources once you hit the wall. Once you hit the wall and then you're not married, your chances of getting access to resources decline. It's because the pool of simps shrinks because many men die or many men get older and wise up and they stop providing resources to women they are not married to. And with many men not getting married anymore, many of these women, they're getting scared and desperate. And the reason why they're getting scared and desperate is because they're looking at the big picture and the precedent set by this Bill Cosby conviction, and they're seeing more and more men taking red pills, more and more men going MGTOW at work and minimizing their interactions with women, and seeing more and more men not going to places like bars, clubs, and restaurants to have interactions with women or look for possibilities and opportunities at relationships with women. Excuse me. And those women are starting to get terrified because the Me Too and Time's Up movement is starting to ruin their access to resources, because they get their resources primarily from men and they get their jobs primarily from men. However, thanks to this legal precedent set by this case and the whole Me Too and Time's Up movement, women are starting to see that their opportunities at employment are starting to dwindle, because many of these men are now seeing that used to see women as an asset in their jobs, because the racists used to use white women as the buffer because they didn't want to hire black men. But thanks to this case, they're saying to themselves that this woman is a traitor to them, and what she's going to do is she's going to hold herself as a sword of Damocles over him if he hires her. So she's a liability now, because all she has to do now, thanks to the legal precedent obliterating due process, is just make an accusation, and she can literally put your business out of business. So the female has destroyed her ability to get hired here in America thanks to this case, and she has destroyed her ability to get access to men's resources with this case. That's why it's in the biggest picture, feminists have literally put the death blow to women here in America, because without the ability to get resources from men, what's going to happen is women are going to be in a lot of trouble, because what this whole case has done is it has led to more and more men becoming red pilled, more and more men going MGTOW, more men helping out with the building of the wall of silence. And the wall of silence is having a huge impact on women, and many women are feeling it right now. And with this Bill Cosby conviction, all that has done has led to the speeding up of the building of the wall of silence, the recruitment of more men into MGTOW, more and more men taking the red pill, and more men putting distance between themselves and women, because they look at these feminists, they look at the Me Too and the Time's Up movement, and they say to themselves that there's nothing to be gained by having any sort of interaction with a woman, because any sort of interaction with a woman can lead to them winding up with their health being put at risk, their safety being put at risk, and their lives being put at risk, because all it takes is for any woman to say anything, and all it can lead to is a man winding up being arrested on trumped up charges, and then being convicted on these trumped up charges because some mangina prosecutor wants to make it look like he's fighting for women's rights, and some judge wants to make it look like he's fighting for women's rights. But in actuality, all he's doing is oppressing men and preventing men from having their rights in a country that they built. And when you have it where men cannot have rights in a country that they built, they stop making efforts to build the country, and they stop making efforts to work towards anything in the country. And that's going to lead, again, to the decline of civilization in the long term. Because if men are not free to have rights in a civilization, they have no incentive to continue participating in a civilization. And this is one of the other things that many of these feminists and racists aren't thinking about in the big picture as related to this Bill Cosby sexual assault conviction, because many, again, are so caught up in their feelings about Bill Cosby's success as a black man that they're not thinking about the overall success of the country. Because in order for the country to be successful, it has to have men feeling safe enough to be able to go out and do things like work and compete. Because if men don't feel safe, they have no incentive to go out here and work and compete. Because if a man goes out here and starts a business and he has to fear hiring women, or fear being sued in a discrimination lawsuit for hiring women, then he has no incentive to go out here and expand a business or even start a business. Because with this female, her gynocentric Jim Crow, all she does is she oppresses men, and she creates a fiefdom where she gets her emotional needs met, but the country does not get its economic needs met. And because it doesn't get its economic needs met, that's what leads to the eventual collapse of the civilization. And that's what these racists really didn't think about when they were going out here to try to prosecute Bill Cosby on that 15-year-old sexual assault charge. All they were thinking about was they wanted to get a N-word, and they wanted to make an N-word pay, and they wanted to destroy an N-word's legacy. But what they didn't see was they were getting ready to destroy the legacies of all men, regardless of all races in America, because with this legal precedent, all that has happened is you have sped up the decline of America. Because once these feminists see that they have now destroyed due process under the law, they're going to now use that as a way to further implement their gynocentric Jim Crow on men, and then try to extrapolate resources through things like civil lawsuits and through punitive judgments to punish all the men they alleged to have oppressed them, but there was no oppression in many of these cases because many of these women were just as complicit in these cases, like with many of these Bill Cosby accusers and many of these accusers of Harvey Weinstein and many others. Many of these women were complicit, but these manginas who are in the court system, they don't understand this, and what they don't understand is that with this legal precedent, they have started the complete collapse of the American civilization. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.